Hello and welcome to LFC Focus. It is pre-match build-up showtime with Liverpool back in Premier League action, defending their mammoth lead at the top of the table this weekend. And this time it's Brighton that we will be coming up against at home on Saturday at 3 o'clock. It's the classic kick-off time at Anfield. And I think after the rather disappointing draw against Napoli, one of the main things that I think we're all thinking going into this game is it would be nice to just see Liverpool get back on track and prove that was a blip. Because there aren't many flaws in this Liverpool side. But if you were to pick just one out from last season, and I think it's pretty much the only flaw you can pick out, it's the fact that when they did start to pick up draws, it became this kind of miniature period of bad form. And I think that's one thing that maybe Manchester City have had over us over the past season and a half, is when they do get bad results, they tend to come straight back and put together a decent run. And while obviously we're in a much better position than them this season, we haven't yet been really tested in the Premier League. We of course had the draw with Manchester United, but there are other external factors you feel that contributed that, such as the fact that we just seem to come across a mental block at Old Trafford. But as we saw last season, Liverpool got that 1-1 draw against Leicester, and before they knew it, they were drawing against West Ham, Man United as well again, and then of course the Merseyside derby. And that is essentially, at the end of the day, what lost Liverpool the league. It's how we lost our lead and allowed Manchester City to come in through the back door, sneak up back up to the top of the table and retain their crown. So I think it's very, very important that we prove that that's not going to happen again this time, and that draw against Napoli was more of a blip than a representation of what things are going, of things to come over this next very, very difficult period. And of course, the fact that Napoli did score a goal and they did cause us problems and we didn't quite get through their defensive line, we don't want that to kind of become a blueprint for teams. It's something I said in the post-match video. We need to come back out in this game and prove that that was more our own failings on the night than a kind of general tactical issue that can be exploited. We don't want Brighton coming along and thinking, well, they can set up the same way as Napoli and get away with it, especially, of course, with the Merseyside derby coming up on Wednesday night. At least one eye will already be on that game when we're playing against Brighton, and we certainly don't want to be giving Everton any hope that they can get a result in that match. So team news going into this game, Twitter obviously exploded this afternoon as it was revealed that sadly Fabinho will be out for a little bit longer than any of us would have liked or even expected. It's apparently going to be up to 8 weeks, although hopefully it won't be that long. He hasn't required any surgery, but he has suffered serious ankle ligament damage, which is going to keep him out for all of these fixtures over the festive period. So of course Liverpool have got plenty of work to do in terms of working out exactly how they get around the problem of not having Fabinho. And I think the main solace that I took from the fact that he's not going to be available, I mean, going into this game against Brighton, just in this game in isolation, he wasn't even going to play in this anyway. He had that suspension from picking up his 5th booking, but of course having him not available for 10 games or so rather than just the one means we maybe have to think about a more, broadly usable contingency plan rather than just throwing someone in his position and saying, you know what Fabinho's been doing? You go and do that. Instead, it needs to be more of a tactical tweak. I think we need to rewrite how our midfield works, and of course, therefore, how the attack in front of it works, how the defence behind it works as well. Because, I mean, if you look back to the start of last season, it wasn't really until around this time in the campaign that Fabinho started to take centre stage and become, an irreplaceable member of the starting 11. And when you think about it, up to that point, Liverpool were doing pretty well, aside from draws away to Chelsea and away to Arsenal, and then at home against Manchester City. We'd won every single game in the Premier League. Of course, results hadn't quite gone our way in the Champions League, and that's a slightly different kettle of fish. But in the league, especially against weaker opposition, we weren't really having any problems at all up until that point. And that's not to say that Fabinho didn't improve us massively and, didn't feel like the final piece in the Jurgen Klopp jigsaw puzzle. He certainly did. We looked like such a much better free-flowing unit once he came in. The way he could move the ball forward and protect the back line as well was fantastic. I'm not doubting that at all. But what is clear is that Liverpool have other ways of playing without Fabinho, and they have contingency plans. And Jurgen Klopp said in his press conference today, which he held this afternoon, that, they will have already been thinking about how to solve this problem. And I certainly don't think it is as simple as just throwing someone into that number 6 role and expecting them to do exactly what Fabinho's been doing and expecting everything to carry on as normal. I think plenty of work will have been put in to making sure we have contingencies. Even before we knew the injury was going to happen, I'm pretty sure every single player, there's a strong, well thought out plan for what happens if they're not available. And Fabinho as pretty much the only singly defensive-minded midfielder at the club. There'll be plenty of plans put in place, and I think it'll be interesting to see exactly how Jurgen Klopp tries to get around his absence this weekend. And of course, with him not being available for the foreseeable future, I do think we will see a little bit of experimenting as well. Certainly in these types of matches where we feel like we've got a bit of leeway. Brighton, no disrespect to them, they are considered weaker opposition. The Merseyside derby is a totally different game to this, and I think in that one we'll play it a little bit more safe. But I think this weekend we might see some more experimentation from the manager to see exactly what kind of solutions we could have to the problem of not having Fabinho available for the foreseeable future. But apart from that, in terms of team news, Naby Keita is confirmed back in the side. He missed out in the game against Napoli due to illness, which was disappointing. I mean, this is an absolutely massive run of games for him now. With one extra player out in the midfield, it opens the door for someone, whether it's Oxlade-Chamberlain, whether it's him, maybe it's even Adam Lallana. Someone has got a huge chance to stake a claim as, a viable option for Liverpool in the centre of the park, and Naby Keita will be relishing this. This could really be a make or break couple of months in his Liverpool career, and I, for one, have got both fingers crossed and everything else crossed that he takes that opportunity and finally shows us the player that we all know he can be in a Liverpool shirt. So Naby Keita available again after the illness that kept him out of the Napoli match. Joel Matip, Jurgen Klopp said he had no idea when he was going to be back and available for us. I think no timescale's been put on that. At the moment, the defence is doing reasonably well without him. Dejan Lovren's been a capable understudy. Joe Gomez has had his problems, but is still fine for, the occasional match here and there. So I think we're just playing it safe with Joel Matip. And of course, there'll be plenty of time to ease him back into the squad through the December run of fixtures. So that is all teams news. As for how I think we're actually going to line up for the game, I think, of course, it's going to be Alisson Becker in goal. There are no arguments there. Hopefully he can finally get a clean sheet. It's been going on forever. I hope we can just put that one to bed now. He can get his first clean sheet in any competition of the season and get off the mark in the Premier League, because we all know he's a fantastic goalkeeper, but he has developed, and the whole defence, to be fair, has developed this rather strange habit of conceding precisely one goal every game. So hopefully we can put that to bed on Saturday afternoon. But Alisson Becker will, of course, be the man in between the sticks, barring any ridiculous aberration that takes him out of the side this weekend. In front of him, I think it is going to be Van Dijk and Lovren. Like I said, it hasn't really been happening for Joe Gomez lately, and the Napoli game was no different. Obviously shunted out into that right-back role. Too much was expected of him in an attacking sense. I think Jurgen Klopp was expecting Napoli to take the game to us a lot more, and that's why he brings Joe Gomez in as the defensive right-back. And also, for rotational reasons as well, Trent Alexander-Arnold did need a little bit of a rest. But as Napoli ended up going up 1-0 up early, and then as a result of that, they basically just sat off and tried, and basically just asked us to attack them and see what we could do. And as a result, Joe Gomez was just forced into a kind of situation that he doesn't really flourish in. So I don't think he's going to be playing in this game. I think Lovren has been more than a capable understudy to Joel Matip during his injury, so he will be partnering Virgil van Dijk. I think we stick with the first choice fullbacks, Trent Alexander-Arnold and Andrew Robertson. There's obviously a question of whether or not Andrew Robertson could do with a little bit of a rest. He missed out on the international break, although that was apparently because of injury, which I think had everyone worrying that he was going to miss out a few games over this couple of weeks. At the moment, it seems like he's fine. Jurgen Klopp said in his press conference today that anyone apart from Fabinho, who did play in the game against Napoli, is fine for this weekend. There's no one who's going to need a little bit more of recovery time. So we should be seeing the first choice fullbacks. That's a bit of a tongue twister for this game. And then ahead of them, I think this is where it gets a little bit interesting, because like I said, we can't just dump in another midfielder and say you play the number 6 like Fabinho has done. And so I think it may be a question of not just, altering the starting 11, but altering the actual setup we have. Because I think if I do look back to last season, before Fabinho came in, people were clamouring for him to be put into the side, and the main reason was that the midfield, it felt samey, it felt stodgy. It was at the time Milner, Henderson and Wijnaldum, and they all felt like they were performing the same roles. And while, there's an element of the manager knows best, and I think it was clear that Jurgen Klopp had the right ideas because we were getting the results as well, I think it was clear even to him that we needed someone like Fabinho in to create a more dynamic setup in the middle of the park where different players were offering different things. So I think if we went back to Wijnaldum, Henderson, and whether it be Milner, whether it be Lallana, whether it's even the other two, Oxlade-Chamberlain and Naby Keita, I think there will be issues in terms of the midfield not quite functioning as it has done so brilliantly with Fabinho in the side so far this season. So I think what we do is we bring back the same solution we had last season when we had that issue of the midfield being stodgy and too samey and repetitive. We switch up to a 4-2-3-1 and just see how that works. Because I think at the moment, while we've got capable players to play in number 6, we've seen Lallana do it reasonably well, Henderson's done it loads in his Liverpool career, and Gini Wijnaldum in the right scenario can flourish in that deep lying role. I personally think that we actually play a lot better without Fabinho if we do that 4-2-3-1 system that we played, if only for a couple of months last season. When we brought it in, it was very effective, especially in these types of games as well, you know, against Brighton type teams, the kind of teams that are going to sit off a little bit but might bring the game to you, but generally have a less quality than you do. The 4-2-3-1 was excellent in terms of adding that little bit of extra flexibility when we were trying to overcrowd the penalty area and stuff like that. An extra attacking player as well, while still having the protection of the midfield. So I think we may switch it up to 4-2-3-1 this weekend. Like I said, with Fabinho being out for so long, Jurgen Klopp will probably start to experiment rather than just doing what he did at Aston Villa, where he decided to take Fabinho out of the side so he didn't have the suspension for the Manchester City game and just put Adam Lallana in his place and hope that everything else functioned as usual. I think with it being a much longer layoff, he's going to try and find a more workable solution, and I think 4-2-3-1 might be that. So I think the deep line midfielders, he goes with Jordan Henderson and Gini Wijnaldum, both of them retain their place. And then further forward, I think it's finally time that we might see the return of Xherdan Shaqiri. You know, I think the 4-2-3-1 was when he played his best football for Liverpool last season. He had that 2-month spell where he was in amongst the goals, in amongst the assists. He was helping to get the best out of the rest of the front three as well. You know, Mo Salah was scoring more goals. Firmino was brilliantly productive in that number 10 role, and Sadio Mane was starting to bang them in from the left-hand side. So I think it is high time we see a little bit of Xherdan Shaqiri. Obviously, he's returned from his injury layoff. He was on the bench against Napoli, so Jurgen Klopp believes that he's ready and raring to go now. And, you know, if there's one criticism of Shaqiri, it's that he is a little bit of a flat track bully. When he got his goals last season, apart from the game against Manchester United, although you can make all sorts of arguments about them being an awful team as well, most of them were against relegation fodder or mid-table teams. But if we're playing Brighton this weekend, you know, they are not... I hesitate to say Arsenal because they're rubbish at the moment, but they're not City, they're not Chelsea, they're not even Leicester. They are further down the table, and if Shaqiri wants to, you know, break out that flat track bully attitude, then this weekend is a perfect time to do it. So I think he should and hopefully will return to the side in that right midfield role in the 4-2-3-1 against Brighton tomorrow, with Firmino getting dropped back into that number 10 role. Now he's had a bit of experience in it last season where, you know, it took him a while to get going, but I think it really reached its peak in the win against Arsenal, the 5-1, where he did play the 4-2-3-1 from the start with Shaqiri, and Firmino gets 3 goals and is absolutely fantastic in that more creative role. I think he goes into the number 10 slot. Sadio Mane out at left mid, and then Mohamed Salah, who's been having some struggles of his own as well. You know, maybe not as drastic as we saw them last season, but still he hasn't quite hit the heights that we know Salah is capable of. I think towards the end of last season, we really saw him get into a vein of form, and the only other time he did it last season was when we moved to 4-2-3-1, and he played as that lone striker that was getting in behind defenders. It worked for that 2-month spell, and I think what better time to resurrect it than now, when we have got a lot of games against the teams that are lower down the table, the kind of teams that really, if we're being honest, we should be battering at the moment. We just aren't. You know, we are scraping results quite a lot of the time against these teams, and I think it would be really nice for the Anfield crowd, especially after the Napoli draw as well, to just put Brighton to sleep with a nice tasty 3 or 4-0. So taking a look at Brighton then, this is of course the first time that Liverpool under Jurgen Klopp will come up against Graham Potter's Brighton side, and for that I am very, very interested, because they never really offered up brilliant opposition when they were under Chris Hughton. I know last season they were reasonably difficult to break down. Both of our games against them were 1-0 wins where, you know, we could have thrown it away. We weren't at our best and they were reasonably solid defensively. But under Chris Hughton, they have become a totally different outfit, and Jurgen Klopp did praise them in his press conference. He was happy that, you know, they had a desire to get the ball and keep the ball and play proper football. And I think that's interesting, because normally under Jurgen Klopp, those are the teams that we found it easier to break down. I think we definitely got round our problem of teams that part the bus, but when we've won 4 or 5-0, it's always been against teams that have come to Anfield with a really open and exciting game plan. They've tried to take the game to us. It hasn't worked out, and as a result, they've got absolutely battered and left with their tail between their legs. So personally, I don't think we should be too surprised if we do see Brighton have a lot of the ball. I think obviously everyone's expecting us to absolutely dominate the game this weekend, but I don't think the crowd should get worried. They shouldn't get on the players' back if Brighton do see a little bit of possession. You only have to look at their game at the Etihad this season against Manchester City, which was of course all the way back in August, but you know, same manager, same players. It's the same kind of blueprint, and they will probably try and follow that for this game as well. Even though they lost that game 4-0, they still played reasonably well. They stayed in the competition for a very long time, and they had something like 48% possession or something like that, which is what Jurgen Klopp brought up in his press conference to try and back them up and beef them up. You know, they clearly don't come away to these teams and sit off, allow them to have the ball. They want to have it. They want to do something with it. And if I've got one criticism of them, It's that they don't actually do that much with the ball. You know, when they do see a lot of possession, they don't create maybe as many chances as they'd want to create and as you'd expect a team with that much possession to create. You know, if they have the ball and they're looking to play quick possession football that creates chances, to not have that many shots on goal, you only have to look back at their last game against Leicester, where they did play reasonably well. They kept the ball, they tried to take the fight to Leicester, but the expected goals were something like 3.5 for Leicester and 0.5 for Brighton. The chances they created just weren't good enough, and they were struggling to put them away as well. And Leicester's figure might be slightly skewed by the fact they had a retaken penalty. I don't know whether that comes into it or not, but as we know, penalties massively skew XG because they have a value of something like 0.7, so that would massively bump up Leicester's value. But Brighton, whether they have more possession, and they did have more possession than Leicester in this case, they can get absolutely torn apart on the counter-attack as a result. That's how Leicester ended up winning the game and getting their goals. And also, they just don't seem to have a lot to offer going forward. And it seems when they do come up against bigger and better sides, they do just fall by the wayside. While they can perform admirably, they just don't have the quality to get by. And maybe that's a shortcoming of the systems of these managers who try and come to the bigger teams and play ball. And maybe they would be better off in these types of games if they did kind of sit back and try and just take one big chance on the counter-attack or something like that. But it is clearly the way they want to play, and they are not going to compromise regardless of the opposition. So that means they are going to come to Anfield on Saturday afternoon. They're going to try and give Liverpool a good game. Whether or not remains to be seen, but I personally would really like to see Liverpool not steamroller a team, because like I said, Brighton are a good side. Jurgen Klopp has a huge amount of respect for what Graham Potter's doing there, but it would be nice to see a much more comfortable scoreline, I think, because it's fair to say, as Liverpool fans, we've been put through the ringer a little bit over the last month or so. We've seen a lot of 2-1s, a lot of late winners, a lot of dramatic turnarounds. If anything, the most, non-heart-stopping, relaxing game was, bizarrely, the home game against Manchester City. But it would be good to just see a smaller side come to Anfield, a team we expect us to beat, and then Liverpool come away with a nice, comfortable result. They stay top of the table, and we can look to what all our rivals are doing and cross our fingers that they trip up this weekend to help Liverpool boost their advantage at the top of the Premier League table. So that is all for today's video. Thank you guys very, very much for watching. If you did enjoy the video, as always, hit that like button down there, hit that subscribe button there if you're new around here. Check out some of the other videos that have been out on the channel over the past few days. Don't forget to follow at LA Focus TV on Twitter, and I'll be back on Sunday afternoon after we've hopefully beaten Brighton to keep that lead at the top of the table. Until then, bye for now.